Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this joint webinar of AmCham Bulgaria and Rud Pedersen Public Affairs in the eve of a very thrilled week of EU elections that are underway in 3 consecutive days this week. And Bulgaria, fortunately or not, having double elections, having national early elections all together with the European ones. And we are very happy having our member, Rud Pedersen Public Affairs, to agree to have such a session, informative one, with our community, with our AmChams in Europe community, seeing many familiar faces. Very glad that you are with us today, and the ones that will follow up the session after its recording, it will be beneficial for them as well, I'm sure. Without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our CEO, Ivan Mikhailov, for some introductory words. Then we'll continue with the main content delivered by colleagues from Rud Pedersen Public Affairs.
Thanks, Danny. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to see so many people attending today, friends from the ACE network. Elias is the vice president. Hello, welcome again to the event. AmCham Bulgaria, together with the Rud Pedersen Public Affairs, we're partnering on an extremely, as Danny mentioned, as well, weird week where we'll see interesting results across Europe. And our intention is purely to discuss as well a little bit of the local context, but mainly what is the future of Europe, because we're hearing different directions. It could be very marginalized. It could be some values of the European Union also could be under question. And everybody are curious to hear what directions we're getting, what to expect in the future. Earlier this year, during the Brussels week of the AmChams in Europe network gathering, there were a lot of discussions about the future of the Europe and what the next parliament will look like, what the next commission will be looking like, what will be the priorities. But the main thing that I think bothers all of us is what is the future of Europe in terms of competitiveness, in terms of place to live, in terms of the future for the kids, in terms of even our future. And I hope today we'll hear a bit of these answers, and I'm sure our colleagues from Rud Pedersen will give their insights and perhaps will give us some thought for to preset our minds as well. And when we go for voting, to be a little bit more informed. That's on my side. I would like now to invite on the virtual stage Jason Nielsen to take over. Jacob, the microphone and the stage is yours.
Strasti. And hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to Brussels. You might not see it, but I'm sitting a little bit further down the street, 1 block away from Susan Danger and all your good colleagues in the AmCham EU, where I've always been fortunate enough to spend a lot of hours of my life, and it's always been incredibly valuable. And of course, the AmCham is recognized here in Brussels as an important voice and a critical stakeholder also when it comes to the development of Europe, and America and Europe have always been very closely linked in that sense, also in that sense. So I have the pleasure of talking you through in 10 minutes what our future looks like. First of all, maybe I should give you the good news, which is that don't worry. No matter what happens next week, Europe will still be there, and you will still be in your corporate lives producing good value, and life will go on no matter what happens. Luckily, everything doesn't depend on politics. But of course, we all take an interest in an election if it has an importance for the direction in which our world is going. And you are absolutely right, Ivan, in your important opening remarks that this is a troubled time, and voters across Europe are looking to their politicians, to their governments, but also to Europe for solutions, for answers to what we should be doing together. So let me try and give you a view, the Brussels view, the undiluted Brussels view on what's going to happen. I've been fortunate enough to spend, or unfortunate enough, if you like, to spend the last quarter of a decade here in Brussels. I've spent most of my time in and out and around the political circles here. Actually, I arrived pretty much together 25 years ago with a very good Maltese friend of mine, Roberta Metsola, who is now running for re-election as President of the European Parliament. But I've also managed to see people come and go over all these years and see a lot of the changes that are happening. So the second piece of good news for you today is, I think, don't worry. Things look to be heading in a direction that falls within the normal spectrum of things. When you see what's happening in the United States, when you see what's happening to the east of us, what's happening in Europe, even if it's important and it's critical, is still looks to be relatively falling within the safe margin of things. What do I mean by that? First of all, you should know that for the European Parliament elections, we are absolutely, as all the statistics are showing us, expecting that we will have a surge in what is known as the right or the hard right or the populist right in Europe. That can have many reasons, and we're not here to talk about them today. But the fact is that when we look at European elections over time, the proportion of more extreme views compared to the more moderate center towards the political parties that are more pragmatic, pro-democratic or pro-European, and the two are not always the same, but who are, let's say, working within the parameters of the political system, are roughly the same as they've always been. So yes, we are talking about a rise in the support for political parties on the extreme right, and it is worrying. I'm also worried about it. But the proportion compared to 20, 30 years ago is actually roughly the same. The European Parliament has always had, it's perhaps a dirty secret, but the European Parliament has always had around 25 to 30% of its MEPs that came from non-establishment or from extreme or fringe parties one way or another. Before, it was Eurosceptic movements, left movements during the 80s and 90s and into the beginning of the noughties. You had movements that were more or less aligned with the Soviet Union. You had movements that were more or less aligned with extreme or sectarian views of different kinds. You had and everything from Jean-Marie Le Pen in France, who openly supported Russian interests, to the Ulster Protestants on the other side. So Europe is used to, it doesn't mean that we like it, but Europe and Brussels as a system, the European Union as a system, is used to being able to accommodate bigger scopes of interest or bigger spread in interest than just the pragmatic ones. What's important is the ratio between the moderate forces that are holding the system together and the more extreme ones. And there we can see that roughly this percentage of 30%, 25% on the left and 5% on the right is now switched so that you have 5 to 10% on the more extreme left and roughly 20-25% on the extreme right. That's not a big difference compared to what the system is, what we are usually used to seeing as parliamentary outcomes. But we are seeing a rise of the hard right. And what does that rise then really mean? Well, first of all, we need to see what kind of hard right it will actually be. Why? Because they tend to not like each other or agree with each other very much. In fact, if there's anything normally as certain as having the election, is that once the election is done and once the populistic movement is over and they have to start agreeing with each other, things become difficult. The first choice is whether you actually support a democratic system of government, yes or no. Some parties will already have been filtered out there. Golden Dawn in Greece was an example. The British Nationalist Party was another example. We have had MEPs from groups that did not recognize democracy as a particularly desirable place to be. They tend to not agree with the others very much. Then the next question is, do you agree with Russia? Are you supportive of Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Some parties will agree with that point of view more or less loudly, but some of them will. And then the next question again is, do you believe that you should be working if you are democratic, if you are not supportive of Russia? The next question is, do you want to work with other parties in order to get influence on politics? And there again, you have a different view between political parties, whether you are Fidesz in Hungary or whether you are the PiS party in Poland, or whether you are the Fratelli d'Italia of Meloni down in Italy. You will have different varying versions of that. So even if you see today Marine Le Pen in France vying or openly suggesting to Giorgia Meloni that they should have an alliance, and you see others like Fidesz in Hungary chiming into that, Orban chiming into that, it's very, very unlikely that they will ever be able to build between them a political constellation or apparatus that would actually allow them to form one group. Even if they did, it would be as second or third largest group. Still, it would be influential, but it would not ever be governing. It would not be part of the let's say the daily decision making necessarily in the way things go, because European Parliament, this is the third good news, European Parliament elections, no matter how they go, tend to be different from national elections. I know you have a national election happening at the same time. You and Belgium are the two, Bulgaria and Belgium are the two lucky countries to have both at the same time. And that will obviously influence the outcomes of the way people vote in the European Parliament elections. European Parliament elections tend in most countries to be places where you go to punish the government, where it doesn't cost you anything, where it's free. So you will vote against the government for the European Parliament election because it's a kind of midterm election. But then when you get to the actual election, you make up your mind only on economic issues and not so much on poverty, on whether you want to protest against the government. So outcomes will be twisted on that. I'm sure Gergana will get back to that in a second. Our outcomes will be influenced by that. But for most of it, European Parliament elections, the dirty truth is that, you know, it doesn't decide the government. It will decide a part of forming the next commission. And so, of course, to an extent, it's important, but it's still, if you look historically over time, it's always the same 2 or 3 factions in the center who end up providing the votes to deliver the next Commission president. It's the European People's Party, it's the Social Democrats, and it's the Liberals. Even if last time the Greens promised that they would be part of the governing coalition, if you like, of the support for von der Leyen, in the last minute they pulled out and decided to be opposition instead. So traditionally, the support comes from the 3 groups in the center. And to a very large extent, this will also be what happens here. Again, the next commission has to be approved with a full majority of the parliament, but it's very likely the way the polls go, and I'm sure Kalina and Ilya from our team in the Sofia office will share the slide with you. As you've all seen the polls, the way things go, the center actually holds. The center should be able to provide plenty of votes beyond the simple majority that you need in Parliament. Now, the difference with European Parliament elections, as I said, is that it's not a government. So it means that you don't have to provide a majority throughout the whole 5-year period for the government to survive. You only have to provide that vote once. and then it takes a much more cumbersome, almost sort of impeachment-like procedure to then unseat a commission president. And as you know, that has only ever happened once, and that was when Jacques Santer got ousted over a corruption scandal back in the 90s. But if you look at the projections for 2024, you will see very clearly that you still have around 400 votes lying safely in the center with the Liberals, the Socialists, and the EPP. This year, this period, the Greens and the Liberals are punished. The Progressives, who were the ones who won the last election, are punished a little bit. There are many reasons for that, I imagine, but many of them have to do with, I think, a change in setting, both with the Ukraine war, but also with the impact of the Green Deal and a lot of the regulation that has come or will be coming on that. But we won't have time to get into all of that in detail now, but we can touch upon it again over the questions. But what is very likely, again, is that the EPP will come out the biggest, and there is a clear consensus both within the European People's Party, but also amongst member states in the Council that Ursula von der Leyen will be reappointed. There is no other credible candidate on the table. We'll get to that in a second. You see identity and democracy certainly descending. Why is that happening? Obviously, it's because they were slated to have a big boost, but obviously, again, as I said, the democracy test that we were applying before. If you think back over the last couple of weeks, certainly AfD from Germany couldn't pass the democracy test anymore, with the lead candidate making very controversial statements, and the AfD not being willing to let go of the lead candidate, basically meant that the Identity and Democracy group had to kick them out and distance themselves from them, which means that the search on the right isn't quite as big as we would have thought. The ECR group, the European Conservatives and Reformists, with Meloni and the Polish Law and Justice Party, are progressing, but they're not progressing enormously. Again, all of this should be taken with the caveat that, of course, around a third of voters haven't made up their mind yet. European Parliament elections are always one of those where a lot of people wait until the very last minute how to vote, but in the end, or to decide how to vote, but in the end, they tend to vote with the political party patterns that we know of. That may very well be different for Bulgaria, where you've had a turbulent number of national elections, but by and large, people end up usually supporting parties that are seen as actually having a track record, or that you are used to supporting. So what will happen this year if the AfD stay out in the cold, the German AfD stay out in the cold, is actually a big increase in the number of non-inscrits, as we call them here, as MEPs who are not in any political party or group. And the good news about that would be that they are largely in political purgatory. If you are non-inscrit, if you are not assigned to any of the groups, you have no influence, you have very little speaking time in the plenary, you have no political weight, you cannot negotiate, you will not be getting any of the important pieces of legislation, you will not be getting any of the chairmanships of any influential committees, you will be largely in political purgatory outside of any political influence. So in fact, them parties peeling up and splitting off would largely neutralize the rise on the right side of the parliament. Now, I expect that we'll probably see a little bit of juggling, and maybe to some extent we could see the ECR taking parts of the Identity and Democracy group and surging or becoming bigger, and then the other half of it falling away and joining the non-inscrit, or basically forming a new group that would have all sort of more anti-democratic parties on the right. But again, even that would mean that largely they would be without influence. So the real question is, if you ask me, is what will the European Conservatives and Reformists group do? Because it seems quite certain that Ursula von der Leyen will be renominated, as I said. It seems quite certain that she will get the support, not for free, but she will get the support of the European People's Party and of the Socialists and Social Democrats and of the Liberals. They are all, apart from the EPP, currently withholding their support. Why are they doing that? Well, partly because they're playing electoral tactics. They want to signal to the voters, if you're on the left, you want to, or amongst the progressives, you want to signal to the voters that you don't like the rise in the hard right. So you're using the hard right to essentially distance yourself from the EPP, putting the EPP receiving support from the ECR, using it to put them into a guilt by association scenario. They are trying to signal that they are different, but all experience shows that once we are done with the elections and it's time to cut a deal, the incentive for the Social Democrats and the Liberals to cooperate is too big. Why? Because they will receive better commissionerships, they will receive better positions if there is a grand deal, both in terms of the vice chairmanships of the Commission, but also in terms of the potential bartering around the president of the European Council, who is also up for renewal, as you know, and other positions in the parliament that matter a lot to MEPs, and that matter how big your office is, how much funding you get, and so on and so forth. Of course, you're electing not just the European Parliament president, but also 14 vice chairmen, and those vice chairmen are very sought after positions. So traditionally, we see that no matter what was the electoral campaign and how bitter it was, the three four main parties will come together and form a supportive coalition to at least pass the vote to nominate the Commission President and the European Parliament President and divide the institutions between them. The big question is, what will the ECR do? And we will probably get a scenario in which the ECR will want to signal to its voters that they are in opposition to what they see as this progressive European project. On the other hand, they will want to stay close enough to power to get and secure some of the vice chairmanships and some of the committee chairmanships and some of the other things that happen. And the good news for the ECR is those are two separate votes. So you can very easily flirt with the EPP and the S&D on resupporting Ursula von der Leyen, and then in the end say, we'll probably we'll stay out, we won't support her, she will still have a majority, so we know she's going to be European Commission President. We won't actively try and stop her because we can't, but we want to signal that we're against, so that we can, for the next 5 years, be the leading voice of the opposition. That was exactly the game the Green group played 5 years ago by not supporting Ursula von der Leyen in the end, but only after they had made sure that she had enough votes to get elected. So it's playing to the theater audience here, if you like, and it's a political theater. And then on the other hand, there is the vote on configuring the European Parliament and making sure that you get your committee chairs, that you get your right seats, that you get represented, and you get good funding and so on. And there I actually expect that we will see the ECR make a deal with Roberta Metsola and the EPP, and make a deal with the Social Democrats and Liberals about how to divide the seats. They will for sure choose one of the two votes to display that they are the opposition. Which one of them it will be will depend a lot on the maneuverings of the different people, but obviously also on the ultimate election outcome. Maybe if we go to the next slide. One thing that has been again always highlighted when we look at the election result is that it's a people's choice. But the hard reality, as you will all know on this call, is that the member states' governments, so the prime ministers and the governing coalitions in each of the countries, have an equal or even bigger say. They are the real shareholders in the family business that is Europe. And ultimately, they nominate the Commission President, and the European Parliament gets a say up or down. So when we look at the process, the real next date to watch is obviously the 17th of June. So right after the elections, when the prime ministers will gather for an informal dinner and most likely have a first discussion and possibly even a consensus on whether Ursula von der Leyen should be reappointed or not. You will see various speculations in Politico and elsewhere saying that Michel is working to undermine her. Well, he might be. The two never got along, but and haven't gone since day one in the leadership 5 years ago. But he will not, in and of himself, have any power to really unseat her candidacy. Why? Because there is no alternative candidate currently on the table. Macron might not be as much of a fan as he was 5 years ago, but he invented her, and Ursula von der Leyen still very much has his support. They've been playing coy, but the same way as the European political groups are holding back their support to negotiate for a better deal, member states are no different. They are all jockeying for position between each other to see who will come out first and say what they want. What seems quite certain, I was in Berlin only a couple of weeks ago, is that the German support for Ursula von der Leyen is there, it's real, and it's present. She was also received with big applause at the CDU Congress, so even the opposition, her own natural party, are strongly behind her. I think we will see that process going relatively smoothly, again with the big question mark being what will Meloni say and do as leader of the ECR? Is she looking to join a governing coalition, being the new centre-right party for Italy, or is she going to be the leader of the European opposition on the right-hand side? So ultimately, the process will stretch out into autumn, and most likely, as is the case, when there are multiple institutions involved, get a lot of delays. The biggest thing to watch out for, I think, in the autumn, once Ursula von der Leyen has most likely been renominated, is how many of the commissioners will have to pay the price for providing some political spectacle when MEPs do the ritual that they always do every 5 years and make commissioners go through hearings. They tend to always make at least 1 or 2 blood sacrifices. The commissioner designates Yeleva from Bulgaria paid the price for that back in, I think it was 2010, when she was not approved in her hearing. I think it was January 2010, we can expect that the same will happen here. And there you will probably see a split between Ursula supporting her commission and having to get them through, and then Social Democrats and Liberals trying to still see if they can get at 1 or 2 of the ECR commissioners, keeping in mind that, you know, there will be several commissioners from ECR-led countries, Italy, and of course the most prominent one, to try and create a rift, a fight between Ursula and the Italians. So that one I think is worth watching simply for that. And then we will probably have some delays, as I said, and then we will be in January or probably even in February before the new commission comes into force. Why should we then look at the European? If everything is always the same way, if it's always the same 3 groups that decide who the leadership is, why should we then care about the outcome of the European elections? Well, for a very simple reason, which is that in the last 10 years or so, with Commission President Juncker and then with Commission President von der Leyen, we've actually had a program, a governing manifesto, if you like, or coalition agreement, if you're German, that sets out what the work program of the Commission will be, that is influenced by the elections to a much, much larger degree than it ever was before. And von der Leyen is very politically in listening mode and still trying to work out exactly what the agenda should be. 5 years ago, everyone expected, certainly in this town, that migration would be the biggest issue. We had, after all, had the Syrian civil war. We had waves of immigration or refugees coming through, and everyone was talking about the refugee crisis. But then suddenly, in the middle of the election campaign, things shifted and climate change became the biggest issue, to the surprise of everyone, even the Greens. And that led to the Greens and the Progressives surging in support in the last minute, and that led to a big, big change in how Ursula von der Leyen's manifesto was. It's worth keeping in mind that back in 2019, in the first drafts of the European People's Party's program, so in Ursula's own coalition, own political family, the word environment was not even mentioned, and suddenly the Commission became the Green Deal Commission. In spite of COVID, in spite of Ukraine, in spite of everything else, the main political focus was on Green Deal. And to some extent, of course, regulating AI and so on, but those were things that sort of came by the wayside and were never as big a part in volume terms of the regulatory agenda as the Green Deal was. If things go the way we look now, where the theme that has been set out is Ukraine, it's defense of democracy, and defense of democracy, as you heard, means both potentially a surge in the people who are not very supportive of it, but it's also being utilized or weaponized by the center to sort of mobilize voters and get everybody to come out and vote for them in support of democracy. It's easier to talk about democracy than it is to talk about complicated regulatory agendas and single market legislation. But obviously, ultimately, in the end, that's what the impact will be on what the output from the Commission and the legislators here is. So what can we expect in those terms? I think it's clear that there has to be solutions found where Europe is going to come down on the potential trade war with China. We have a trade deal with China that was signed by Ursula von der Leyen in her first year, but was never ratified. We've seen a lot of member states and increasingly a lot of the EPP and the ECR agenda being about deregulation, cutting red tape. It's an old theme, but it has been revived again because a lot of member states and a lot of businesses are rightly worried that the single market has been faltering. And so you've also seen with the Draghi report and the Letta report that European competitiveness has come back to the agenda again in the last. And it will be very interesting to watch now in the last month to what extent that actually gets to the forefront of the agenda. If it does, then I think we can expect that the von der Leyen's Commission too will come out very focused on competitiveness and will come out very focused on deregulation after essentially a first von der Leyen Commission that was all about government getting an increased role, both on COVID and intervention into the health space in ways none of us had ever imagined, then on Green Deal, and then on defense and security matters because of the invasion into Ukraine. So most likely we will now see a typical Brussels rebalancing. So again, this is nothing new. After a wave of regulation, before Ursula von der Leyen, it was the Euro crisis and financial services regulation of excessive investments or risky investments and government debt. This time around, we will probably see a recalibration where some of the Green Deal and some of the tech regulation that has followed that has preceded us in the last 5-10 years, GDPR, copyright directive, and other things, will get reviewed and probably pulled back a little bit to give some credence to those who don't think that Europe should get involved in too many issues. A big thing has also been, for example, harmonization of social rights and freedom of movement of workers and things like European harmonization of maternity leave, ESG and CSR directive imposed rules on disclosure for listed companies, I think we'll see a retrenchment or a gradual pulling slightly back or more proportionate application of that after that. It's a little bit what the Americans call the Potomac two-step. Brussels also takes 2 steps ahead and then takes 1 step back again. We will see what the outcome brings, but most likely Ursula von der Leyen's interpretation of what the surge to the right means will be that we try and recalibrate the regulatory ambitions, the level of degree of government involvement and European involvement in the corporate space to some extent. And that's not different from what we're seeing in other parts of the world. So I think that's a long story to tell you a little bit about how the outlook from Brussels is. It will be very interesting, as I said, to watch what the themes will be in the last couple of weeks, because we have so many undecided voters, more than 35% undecided, but also, as I said, because the next commission will, to a very large extent, take some cues, political cues, from what's on the agenda now. One last thing, maybe from me, because this is the kind invitation of the Bulgarian AmCham, the Bulgarian Chamber, is that whoever the Bulgarian commissioner will be, people will be watching. My home country, Denmark, has been very fortunate to have a series of commissioners that people felt were personally very capable. Margrethe Vestager is the current one, but before that you had a series of others that were seen as being competent and hardworking. Bulgaria has had exactly the same. No matter what your political affiliation or preference might be, you have a proud tradition in Bulgaria, actually, for delivering commissioners who are seen as politically astute and capable. Commissioner Gabriel, Commissioner Georgieva, and even Commissioner Kuneva before that. And it matters. So not only election outcomes matters, and obviously your new national government will choose who the next commissioner will be, so it will matter, your election will matter in 2 senses. But whoever that person is could have a potentially influential position here in Brussels, also because of the work of hers or his predecessors in the world. So I wish you good luck with the elections as they play out now in the last week. So thank you for your attention. I'm very happy to take any questions, and also pass the floor now to my colleague Gergana, who heads up our excellent Sofia office.
Thank you very much, Danny. Can I continue? I noticed that we managed to consume most of the time that we had for presenting you our point of view, and I will not go so much deep into Bulgarian environment, and I will tell you why. First of all, because of the timing, but also I don't think that Bulgaria is much more different from other member states, and I will tell you why. I'm starting with this. Jacob said that he's sitting in Brussels. I'm not sitting at the moment in Brussels, but back in time I used to also work in Brussels and the European Parliament. At the moment sitting in the beautiful city of Plovdiv, second biggest city is in Bulgaria. And I can tell you, I see that there is a colorful audience today here. Very grateful to AmCham for this collaboration and for all of you for your time. We are also a colorful group at Rud Pedersen, and we have 17 different offices. 18 offices in 17 different countries. And when we gather, we have the same discussion, and you can see that everybody says, that my country is different. We have a terrible, awful political turbulence in the country, and it's nightmare. But you can see it from all other sides, and you realize that actually. Of course, there are nuances and there are different points of view, but still Europe is one place, and you can see also a lot of similarities. And I totally agree with what Jacob said about EU being a system that has its own tools to accommodate differences. Back in 2009, when I started my work in Brussels and in the European Parliament, the biggest difference and really different party was the Pirate Party. I don't know if someone still remember it. At that time, European Union still didn't have any piece of legislation dedicated to digital transformation or whatever. So it was a big issue, and it was really interesting, a new, different party. And afterwards, we saw that, you know, we have tools internally to accommodate these differences. And I won't, again, I will say I will not go so much into details of the Bulgarian situation, but I want to share with you one survey that was issued just recently. Maybe some of you come across, but it is so much connected, and it's probably kind of a try to explain the situation that we face now on these elections. It is so connected with what Jacob said at the beginning, the good news that he transferred to all of you, and he said, don't worry. And I also think there are not so many reasons to worry, but of course there are many also new things. This survey was presented and was done with from international think tank, and it's actually was commissioned in 10 EU member states plus 2 not any more member states, UK and Switzerland. So it's quite representative, and one of the things that it says is that actually first of all, the name of the survey is the politics of trauma in Europe during election year. And actually, it's use a lot of terminology connect with worries and fears of people, and that's why I think it's interesting, because it says that actually 6 out of 10 citizens in Europe believes and actually feel that their own country heading into wrong direction. Usually politics is a balance between fears and hopes. All of us that deals with politics know this. But now, especially in the last 15 years, EU experience a lot of unbalanced situation connect with 5 major crises. Actually, survey says that Europe experienced 5 major crises connect with climate crisis, global financial crisis, also migration crisis, COVID crisis, and last but not least, a war in Ukraine. So all of these crises was felt very intensive across all EU countries, and dramatically affected all government policies, or many of the government policies. All these crises are not over yet, and there is no single solution that fits all of it. So this is the background that we face. Authors of the survey and the analysis says that it's actually, they call it with the terminology polycrisis, and they distinguish different voters, tribes, that every one of these tribes has its, motives, and actually experience this, the crisis like existential threat for themselves. It doesn't matter in which one they believe is the real crisis, but yeah, it's definitely one of the explanation why, or at least from my point of view, why one party can't represent all these different crises and the different solutions and the different profile of peoples that stand with their mainly fears behind it. It appears that actually far right, not that they really can propose a solution, but they better help voters to digest this changing world and the situation and the demography that we face. So if we can ask ourselves who will win in the next elections, my simple answer is no one. Actually, I believe that the name of the game in next term will be building coalitions. Who is able to build better and stable coalitions and to communicate in the right way. As Bismarck said in the past, politics is the art of possible, art of the next best. So when we have on the table the Green Deal, which is investment plan for 10 years, 1 trillion investment plan for 10 years. There were some estimates during this term that actually says that the real estimation is around 5 trillion actually. And then we see at the same time, I mean, it's a big gap and big difference, and we see at the same time that member states can't really agree on 75 billion gap in the budget due to the Brexit, the exit of UK from the EU. So what I want to say with all this kind of introduction, and I will of course highlight this slide and the result that we see there, again from the perspective of coalition, is that actually, and I see it as a good sign, actually wants to be positive, that in the next term, there's supposed to be much more communication and different players working together. So hopefully, as Greg says in the past, that the truth is born in the debate. So we believe that because actually European Union in the next term needs to face a lot of truths, which became very obvious after this last term. So
Gary,
just a few
Gary,
words.
I have to mention that we've got 10 minutes of the agreed time.
Okay, I stop here so that we have a chance to hear what people can comment also of what was presented. Thank you very much again, and sorry for being so long.
I've been in the role of the whip, not having the role that role in the European Parliament, but still we had to observe the time. We've got one question, and despite the fact that we didn't discuss that slide here of the forecast distribution of the Bulgarian MEPs that will take part into the next European Parliament, I'll read that question coming from our colleague Milko from MSD Bulgaria. Can we make a projection who will become the next Bulgarian EU commissioner? Jacob was very kind to make a reflection of the previous 3-4 Bulgarian EU commissioners, all women, by the way, a very important fact to mention. And some of them, like Kristalina Georgieva, made their career in the IMF and the World Bank altogether, or subsequently. And also, can we make a projection about the portfolio, or it will be much easier to have an answer in November or even December this year? Gary, Jacob, do you have any thoughts with that regard?
Gergana, it's probably you best on the personality of the.
Okay.
Of the I can speak
Honestly,
to the portfolio after.
yeah, yeah, I will not bet on my diploma, university diploma, who will be the next commissioner from Bulgaria. Definitely we have good candidates, but honestly, of course, all of us, we know that the next government will propose the candidate for commissioner, for Bulgarian commissioner, and we face a really difficult situation in Bulgaria. It will be very difficult to form a government because the projection is that again we will face very close results. Of course, now the difference will be bigger, but still we will need coalition. So I believe that it will be. At the moment, it's kind of very difficult to predict. It will be, again, coalition and, again, hard negotiations between the ones that will be in the coalitions who will be the Bulgarian commissioner. So, honestly, I don't want to predict now.
On that note, because it's, again, not the first time, it's not the first rodeo, member states have elections whenever it suits them, which is a good thing. And it means that sometimes they're just not ready to nominate a commissioner. And that means that you tend to pick somebody who would be uncontroversial, either somebody slightly more technocratic, either coming from a high-level civil servant position, or even sometimes coming from academia or from outside of the party political spectrum. Now, I know that Bulgarian politics are tough, and you might not necessarily be able to form a consensus around it, but the reality is that the boat is leaving town, or the train is leaving this summer, and you will need to nominate somebody in time. Typically, Ursula von der Leyen, if you look at last time, asked for a female and a male candidate from every country, and then it was really up to the CV and the competences of the person, but it was also very much a geopolitical choice. What do I mean by that? Is that, von der Leyen very astutely picked countries and put them in charge of what they would be most interested in. The Greeks got European values based on, the whole Hellenic idea of the Hellenics being the parents of modern Europe. But people basically the Hungarians got near neighborhood because they feel very strongly about the diaspora and about some of the issues for good and for bad, as we have seen afterwards. But the choice was made to basically give countries something that they could go home and sell as a victory or influence for them on their issues. So again, I expect that if Bulgaria is not able to deliver a strong commissioner candidate in time, you'll probably end up at the back of the queue, unfortunately. But as I said, what's speaking in your favor is that you have been able to nominate what people consider to be very competent candidates in the past. So another option would be to simply reappoint Ivanova, whether or not she has the backing of an active majority in parliament. But that is a Bulgarian decision ultimately at the end of the day.
Jacob, thank you so much. Anelia has risen her hand, and Anelia, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Danny. Well, either to Gergana or Jacob, whoever is ready to comment. Probably you've seen that we had the pleasure to host Ursula von der Leyen just like 2 days ago. She was here in Plovdiv, where we are currently, and she made a comment that during the next mandate, one of the priorities is to decrease with 25%, believe it or not, the bureaucracy for business and to improve the competitiveness of the business environment in the EU. So how would you comment this, and what do you see probably as first actions in that direction?
Thank you. That's a very good question, because that puts really the finger on the fact that nobody has a very clear idea how exactly that should be done. As I said, there's always typically a deregulation move inside the specific set of legislation around an area, whether it was financial services, with MiFID and capital requirements legislation, whether it's been on the Green Deal, whether it's been on tech. And I think we will see a lot of that. And I think we will see an attempt at using this new, slightly stronger right-leaning, more strongly right-leaning potential majority, as Gergana was saying, in terms of the more complex debates in Europe, that we will see a day-to-day majority in the European Parliament, but also amongst member states in favor of less regulation. But one thing is the beautiful intention to decrease regulation for businesses, something which I know the AmCham also feels very strongly and passionately about. Another thing is the reality in practice is that people cannot usually agree what regulation is the one that should be cut. All regulations exist because lobbyists and politicians have agreed that it was a good idea to have it to stop the market from doing something it would otherwise have done, right? That is why ultimately lobbying was invented, but also why government was invented. And so it's very hard traditionally to implement it in practice. We've had several, almost every commission president has tried, from Barroso onwards, has tried unsuccessfully to reduce the amount of red tape in Brussels. So I would almost put the onus back on you as dear members of AmCham. You have to continue to lobby in favor to try and come up with concrete examples of things that can be done. I think what's clear is that there will be a willingness to listen in this mandate much more than there was in the last mandate as to good ideas for how regulation can be reduced. But you should be prepared that it's going to be a long and hard struggle to get it realized in practice. I would also say that, looking at Gergana's poll that Daniel, you were referring to just before, it's important that you lobby your Bulgarian MEP-elects to actually sit in the right committees in the European Parliament, because it makes a big difference whether you are sitting in foreign affairs or whether you are sitting in the committees that actually make a difference for your businesses. You should encourage them to join committees that are otherwise very unpopular because they're considered boring and not very media friendly, and that don't attract a lot of attention, but really move the big numbers. The Transport Committee, the Environment Committee, the Industry Committee, which also has energy in it, all the committees that really make a difference and where Bulgarian MEPs really can make a positive impact. So please do encourage your MEP elects, especially as they are sitting most likely in some of the larger groups, as you can see from the poll, APP, Social Democrats and Liberals. Try and encourage them to really sit where they can be the most influential. That would be a big lift for your members, but it will also be a big lift for Europe.
Dani, if you let me just a few sentences on top of it, really sorry. Yeah, it's. I would like just to continue what Jacob was saying, that it's really important who and it really matters who represents you. I know this by heart and from my own experience, and yeah, I had a chance to give this example in another discussion, but yeah, we have just 17 MEPs, which is not that much, but it's, I believe it's enough if they can coordinate themselves and if they are open to get impact from business and citizens. And yeah, I mentioned that in previous terms, we witnessed, like 6 out of 17 Bulgarian MEPs being in AFET committee or foreign committee, which is great. Of course, it's geopolitics is a very important topic, but I believe that it could be much more well, spread in different committees. And as Jacob said, yeah, some of them are considered boring, but and I really like something that I really like about the EU is that it sets higher standards on different domains. And for example, I'm particularly interested also on online environment. The fact that the previous term set higher standards on online environment, but at the same times we witnessed that this slowed down and was kind of over-regulated, and I believe that in this term the Commission needs to focus more on implementation, simplification, alignment with different regulations, because we can see the clash now in different regulations, and it's when it doesn't work, it doesn't matter that it exists from my point of view.
Super. Many thanks, both of you, Jacob, Gergana. There is another question from Milko with that regards, how we can, the right-sized countries as Bulgaria to be more active, to have a driver's or co-pilot seat at some of the most influential committees. And Jacob answered it partially that despite the turbulence in Bulgaria, having an agreement on the high priorities of Bulgaria within the European Union will lead to a proper nomination of a less controversial person that has the better qualification experience. But in our reality, that's a dream come true, which might not be the reality. However, cross fingers that it will happen. On behalf of AmCham Bulgaria, Ivan and I and the other colleagues pushing high the EU agenda with our external affairs, collaborating with our colleagues in AmChams in Europe, having insight with such prominent members as Rud Pedersen Public Affairs. Again, many thanks having you all here. Jacob, Gergana, it was a pleasure sharing your insight, your knowledge. Ivan, final words, please.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks, Jacob and Gary, always a pleasure, and the discussion, although the time is not enough, and I'm sure we can continue even more hours and there will be more and more questions, but thank you for the insights. Thank you for the thoughts. I think, yeah, the picture is not that dark. Actually, it's there is a bright future in front of us, and we will continue to be active in Bulgaria through our network as well, for the European agenda and for, as I said in the beginning, for a better future. Thank you, everybody, for joining with us today, and wishing you a good time in the rest of the week as well.
Thank you very much on our behalf as well. Thank you, guys.